Alrighty, I was just sharing the study link to the live on my various apps, social media, whatnot. Hope folks will do the same. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to CRWS study on racial matters. We are doing the introduction. Getting started, we'll be listening to the context of white supremacy, hosted by Gus T. Renegade. We're going to be listening to a little bit of his interview with Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly, the author of the book we're going to be discussing today, Racial Matters.
And I know non-white people who have doctorates, PhDs in history and all other sorts of fields. I've never talked to a non-white person who has that sort of information, which is why I consistently say on my show, I believe that Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. is completely accurate in saying white people are much more informed about black people. White people are much, much more informed about all of the non-white people, victims of white supremacy. They make it their business to be informed about non-white people. That's number one. I was going to later on get to what your point that you made about the FBI being concerned with all black people, but that was pretty outstanding right there. You said the term COINTELPRO. Again, most non-white people that I encounter have no idea what that means. Could you explain that so that, like, if a teenager is listening to this show, they could get a really clear understanding of what you mean when you say COINTELPRO?
Yeah, that's actually really simple. All it means.
Can I interrupt you?
Sure.
I apologize. I took a class from Julian Bond. For everybody out there who does not know Mr. Julian Bond, he was in SNCC, big participant in the Civil Rights Movement. I took a class from him, History of the Civil Rights Movement. COINTELPRO never came up in his class on the history of the Civil Rights Movement. And I just would like to add, well, I'll ask you about that later. I apologize for interrupting. Please continue in explaining COINTELPRO, sir.
Yeah, in a nutshell, COINTEL is this. If you come within eyesight of the FBI, they're going to mess you up. Okay. Now, again, let me qualify that the FBI is not all bad. A lot of what the FBI does is fine, honorable work. But on the political side of the FBI, if you do something they don't like, they won't simply write it down, put it in a file. They will act on it and try to mess you up. Now, the FBI is also sort of non-discriminatory here. The FBI ran these formal counterintelligence programs to mess people up, not just against blacks. Although the black COINTELPRO is sort of interesting because two of the big targets are the Prince of Nonviolence, right, King, and the Prince of Violence, Malcolm X. So that's a pretty big program if you can go from King to Malcolm. And so that's one COINTELPRO, but the FBI had a bunch of them. They ran a COINTELPRO against college students who protested the Vietnam War. They ran a COINTELPRO against, the old left people, the Communist Party and the Social Workers Party. They even ran a counterintelligence program against the Ku Klux Klan. And the thing about these counterintelligence programs is, number one, this is the police doing this stuff. And what they're doing is just patently illegal. Like in King's case, one of the famous COINTEL programs is the FBI starts writing, anonymous letters to Martin Luther King's wife, trying to inspire a divorce, trying to inspire King to kill himself, suicide. It's just, flat out crazy. But again, a lot of white people were targeted too for the same kind of stuff. Like a college kid protesting the Vietnam War, the FBI might go to, the institution or foundation or state agency that's giving that kid a loan or a scholarship and try to get a scholarship revoked. And so it's, really across across the board. And you can see the legacy of this type of stuff even today. And once in a while, someone will stand on a street corner with a copy of the Declaration of Independence, and they'll ask people to sign it, like a petition. And people won't do it because they don't want to sign anything, because it's dangerous. And one thing about the FBI COINTELPRO is, yeah, if you get involved, it can be dangerous, and the FBI might come after you. Now, having said that, you have to realize the FBI is really not that big. They don't have that many agents, and so they can't go after every Tom, Dick, and Harry. But, again, having said that, one COINTELPRO operation was actually meant to make people believe that they could go after everybody. And so, and again, in other words, the FBI doesn't have the resources to target every single person that bugs them. So instead of doing that, what they do is try to make people afraid. And that was one of the basic counterintelligence tactics, to scare the bejesus out of people.
And that's just small, very tiny glimpse into the sort of terror that race soldiers who sometimes call themselves the FBI has committed against Black people. This introduction is only about 8 pages, and it was very, very constructive. I learned a lot. We're mostly going to be focusing on what happened to victim of racism, Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, in June of 1963, when she was beaten and captured by race soldiers. So let me read a bit from the text. And it should be stated that she was first placed on the FBI list, J. Edgar Hoover's list, after attempting to place her name on a voter ballot in the courthouse. So we have here from page 2 of Racial Matters. Fannie Hamer's second encounter with the FBI occurred on the second Sunday in June 1963, after she stepped off a bus in Wyoming, Mississippi. Hamer and 5 companions were returning from a voter registration workshop in nearby South Carolina when their bus pulled in for a rest stop. June Johnson and James West went to the lunch counter to sit with Annell Ponder. Uvester Simpson and Rosie Mary Freeman went to the whites-only restroom. What might have been an uneventful encounter, perhaps ending with a white waitress mumbling about how she can't take no more, and white customers mumbling about Negroes using the wrong toilets, ended disastrously. Wynonna Police Chief Thomas Harold ordered the 5 Blacks out and arrested them on the parking lot when Ponder began jolting down the license plate of his cruiser. Get that one too. Hamer left. Get that one too. Chief told Montgomery County Sheriff Earl W. Patridge after Hamer left the bus stop to see if she could help. So we have here Fannie Lou Hamer. She sees her companions being arrested. She gets off the bus, and the race soldier yells, "Get that one too." I'm going to continue. The officers brutalized 4 members of the group at the actually, no, I'm not gonna read from the text here. because I found this information. I'm going to read from the FBI document later. But yeah, actually, there's something here that's very, very, very important. There's here it is. I'm only going to read the a little bit because I have the rest from the FBI document. The officers brutalized 4 members of the group at the Montgomery County Jail. They botched their first beating. June Johnson, a 14-year-old girl in a pink dress, bled profusely. So they used blackjacks on the others. So we have race soldiers torturing a 14-year-old victim of racism. And so this is just shows that the system of racism and white supremacy, it has been practicing this behavior. White people who have decided to practice racism, they've been doing this for a very, very long time. And I definitely have heard about Fannie Lou Hamer. I know she was very significant in the so-called civil rights era, but I've never have learned in detail about her being tortured, nor her associates, June Johnson, Uvester, I think it was Uvester Simpson, yes, Rosie Mary Freeman, and Anel Ponder. So let me read what happens. So she's arrested. Kenneth O'Reilly, he didn't put the charges that she was arrested for, but they arrested all of them for disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? It doesn't often happen. Anyway, let's get to the document. So this is after Fannie Lou Hamer gets, she's in greater confinement, known as jail. Let me get some water before I read all this. So before this happens, the race soldiers separate her from her companions, from her associates. Before this happens, she was separated. They are placed in separate cells and beaten, are subjected to some sort of torture individually. So this is from the this is the FBI document itself. Everyone can easily find this document at their FBI website, and it's very useful. You can type in any person's name, and if the FBI has a file on them, it'll pop up, and then you can just do a lot of research yourself. Because it doesn't describe, Kenneth O'Reilly does not, at least in the introduction, describe precisely what happened to a victim of racism, Ms. Hamer. So I'm going to begin reading. A short time later, Ms. Hamer was taken from her cell to another cell where there was a state highway patrolman, unknown subject number 3. Also in this cell were 2 other white men, unknown subject number 2 and unknown subject number 4. Unknown subject 4 was recognized a day or 2 later by Mrs. Hamer wearing a Winona, Mississippi police officer's uniform. However, while he was in the cell on June 9th, 1963, he was wearing a light blue shirt and navy blue pants with nothing to identify him as an officer. Oh, wait, did I skip too much? Oh yeah, I skipped. We're supposed to be reading, we're not supposed to be reading that. We're supposed to be reading. Oh no, we are supposed to be reading this. I thought I was reading the wrong part. Continuing, a Mississippi State Highway patrolman questioned Mrs. Hamer about where she had been and why she had been in Charleston, South Carolina. She told him she had gone to a citizenship training school, and he contradicted her, saying, "You went to march and you went to see Martin Luther King, and we are not going to have it." The highway patrolman then gave a blackjack to one of the Negro prisoners and told Mrs. Hamer to lay on the bed in the cell. The other prisoner then sat on Mrs. Hamer's feet, and the first prisoner was ordered by the patrolman to beat her. The highway patrolman said that they were not going to kill her, but she would wish she were dead before it was over. Unknown subject number 2 was wearing dark trousers and white shirt and nothing that would identify him as an officer. Height, don't know what this word says. And I've hits Mrs. Hamer in the face and on the head a couple of times with his hand, and when she was screaming from the blows of the blackjack and told her to shut up. After the first prisoner finished beating her, the second prisoner was ordered by the highway patrolman to take his turn, and then unknown subjects 2, 3, and 4 left the cell. During the second beating, at an unrecalled later time, the highway patrolman came back to the cell and told the prisoner to stop the beating. The patrolman then led Mrs. Hamer back to her cell where she had originally been placed with no medical treatment was afforded, although she had been beaten severely with the blackjack over her entire body, including her arms, legs, and head. All right, so this is very terroristic and to be expected in the system of white supremacy. And for clarity, let's find out what a blackjack is. I'm pretty sure it's some sort of club, some sort of, yeah. So let me get, what is this that they were brutalized with? Because it keeps being mentioned. So it was something like some sort of whipping device. This is how slaves have been, non-white people, victims of racism, sort of things we have been subjected to for a very, very long time. Motivation to solve this problem. But yeah, I just wanted to get and that just that systematic torture of Miss Hamer, and I'm certain her associates, simply because, hey, she's a Black female victim of racism. She has been led to think that getting her voting rights is going to help her and make her life more, make her existence more constructive. And I think it definitely could have, but because she's attempting to improve her existence, she's being terrorized. And this still happens 2022. Non-white people attempt to improve themselves, attempt to, counter the system, and we are met with devastating, brutal consequences. And I do appreciate this document because it definitely refers to her as a victim, and it can learn a lot. I thought it was very interesting, and something else I learned from this document was see if I I'm going to get back to the text. I'll get back to the document in a second. Okay, so this is very interesting. This is from the text, page 3. John Lewis SNCC's chairman in 1963, and later a United States congressman from Georgia, elected in 1963, posed a simple question a few months later after the Wynonna incident. I want to know, which side is the federal government on? Lewis organization had recruited Mrs. Hamer as a non-violent soldier for a people's army engaged in a protracted conflict with the formal racism that ruled in Mississippi and across the South. In fighting that larger war, SNCC activists saw an ambivalence in the United States government, apparent refusal to choose sides, and a conflict where right and wrong were clearly marked, good and evil were easy to see, with Hamer on the one side and Mississippi and segregationists on the other. Yet it remained unclear whether only federal representatives sent to the scene sided with the police or their victims. So studying of the document of this text, we learned that the FBI definitely sided with the race soldiers. But what John Lewis said, which side is the so-called federal government on? And according to conspiracy logic, there's only two sides, those who believe in the production of justice and those who believe in the practice of racism, white supremacy. I think that's why the FBI sided with the race soldiers, and because we have, as a simple question I asked myself, what kind of white people are in the FBI, are in so-called highway patrol roles, positions, law enforcement? These are the same kind of white people who choose and decide to practice race and white supremacy. They're racist. So if you have racist in any form of like institution, whether you're calling it the FBI or the highway patrolman, you're going to get the same results. Black people being terrorized and mistreated, and no matter how honorable or the institution is supposed to be, or no matter if the institution is supposed to be upholding some sort of constitutional rights. We're in a system of white supremacy, and the average racist doesn't consider a victim to have any rights, I suspect. So I thought that was very, very interesting. Continuing with the text, it says here on page 4, the FBI investigation of the Wynonna incident was typical of its civil rights work. Bureau agents investigated thousands of skirmishes between movement troops and the segregationist resistance, and to describe one of these investigations is to convey a sense of them all. Federal agents stood by, to all appearances, allied through their own studied neutrality with the enemies of Black people, rather with those who risk their lives to demand justice, dignity, and a fair share of democracy that white America always seems to be celebrating. Hamer concluded her story in Atlantic City by asking the American people, is this the land of the free and the home of the brave? That such a thing could happen in the United States was bad enough. It is even worse that federal policemen seem to encourage brutalities by their refusal to protect people like Hamer in the first place or pursue justice after the fact. So they have so much information that, yeah, I heard these Black people being beat. I didn't see anyone being beat. I heard them, but the FBI still don't, bring any charges to the race soldiers who beat Fannie Lou Hamer and her associates. And also everyone involved, everyone who was captured that day, they were all found guilty of resisting arrest and disorderly conduct after being brutalized by race soldiers. I'm pretty sure that still happens today. But I read this because FBI, they have the resources, the power to just do all this. They can do all these investigations, they can do all this stuff, but they cannot help the Black people. That is the demonstration of not having the will, but having the ability. So if race soldiers, if I suspect if even white people, not even the racist one, but if just regular white people wanted to help Black people, it's very possible. But the most powerful white people, the racists, they definitely have the ability to solve this problem. They have the ability to create all these institutions, CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, all these orgs that have tremendous resources. But hey, Black people are still being terrorized, still can't have a system of justice for some reason. Well, not for some reason, just do not have the will to produce such a system. Which is why we have to have an effective number of non-white people and at every corner of existence. Hey, bumping into a white person, hey, when we're gonna get this justice thing? Are you gonna kill all of us? Which one's gonna happen? That if we had needed an effective number of non-white people, demanding justice, or this is gonna continue forever. We're just gonna get new institutions, the future institutions, 2077, we're still gonna get non-white people getting vaporized by race soldiers. And this is not good. We need to solve this problem ASAP. Oh yeah, so I'm just gonna read more of that. Just demonstrates what I've been talking about here in this broadcast. Again, from page 4, a reluctant federal government assumed the burden with the Justice Department shouldering most civil rights responsibilities and funneling those responsibilities to one of its parts. The Civil Rights Division lawyers in turn considered what sort of legal action was appropriate in any given case. The police officer or clansman or citizen council patriot who enforced segregation with a nightstick or a rope, or an eviction notice, might be prosecuted under an old federal law from the Reconstruction era. A Southern county might be sued under the modest civil rights legislation of the Dwight Eisenhower years, the Civil Rights Acts of 1957 and 1960, for refusing to allow Negroes to vote. To make informed choices about who to prosecute or sue, Civil Rights Division lawyers rely on the part of the Justice Department that gathered evidence and performed investigative work for the department as a whole, the FBI. So then we have all this being said, and they were introduced to the FBI director at the time, J. Edgar Hoover. And Kenneth O'Reilly, he says that Mr. Hoover, he didn't want to be actually I'm not even gonna paraphrase. I'm just going to read and comment on what I think. He says here, Hoover also argued that the FBI had no constitutional right to usurp the responsibilities of the state and local police to maintain law and order. The culpability of Mississippi lawmen and denying Fannie Lou her civil rights was not the issue. The director did not condone white violence. He simply dismissed it as a local problem. And just according to, well, just I'm commenting on Hoover's like practice of deception, because I'm certain he knows this is not a white violence is not a local problem, and especially when this is happening in the midst where Black people across the so-called United States are being treated pretty viciously by white people overtly. This is when white people had no problem, calling Black people boy, niggers, and made it known that, yeah, the system of white supremacy, the equation is white over you, white over non-white, especially if you are Black. So this race problem has never been a local problem, but Hoover was a master of deception. He was a master of using rhetoric, words to justify, hey, we need all these FBI dossiers. We need a dossier on Miss Hamer, Fred Hampton. Actually, all the Black people. If you mention anything Black, anything like that, if you mention that you want Black people's condition to improve, we need to be watching that one, because yeah, we can't have that. We're in a system of white supremacy. Our business is to keep that going, not to improve the existence of Black people. But continuing with, that one go. Oh yeah, so I think this is more evident of his master deception, Hoover's. With the government and the people of the United States uncertain about how to respond to the Black struggle in 1963, Hoover had no difficulty in locating broad consistencies for his position. President John F. Kennedy and Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy respected and sometimes deferred the director's strict interpretation of federalism, while many whites in the South and across Middle America shared the director's belief that the Constitution does not deal in general with the relationships between one private individual and another. So I read this and I just thought, wow, they just either were really good with their code words at the time, but just simple logic is a so private individual and another. I thought race soldiers were supposed to be public servants, so that's all. Like just disqualifies them from being a private individual, whatever that means. If you are working for the so-called state, you're supposed to be some sort of public servant, and of course, if public servants are employees of the state are violating or terrorizing people, then maybe the so-called government should intervene. But no, we're seeing very powerful people at the time saying, no, we're not supposed to. It says right here in our Urugu doctrine, and all the words and letters and paper that we've combined here together, that says here we don't have to help the Black people. You see, I would also urge everyone to check out Urugu to understand how they use this doctrine to justify this incorrectness that we non-white people are enduring 24/7. Yep. So over here on page. I want to continue with my notes reading. So Hoover is from page 6. Hoover justified his reluctance to investigate the Waiona brutality aggressively by reference to the constraints of existing federal state statuses, no, not statutes, states' rights, principles, and the lack of consensus on the question of whether the nation needed a second Reconstruction. So again, they will use doctrine, instead of just following, the humane thing to do, which is why we don't have humans on planet Earth currently. But instead of doing the logical thing, the constructive thing, hey, we don't care about what we have written here. The constructive thing to do is to end the mistreatment of these people, and the people who have mistreated them, we have to punish them. That's how so-called FBI directors should have acted. But we don't live in a system where people practice correctness and thinking like that. We have here a planet dominated by racists, and they use racist logic, which justifies the mistreatment of non-white people, especially Black people. And just this code word here, this code phrase, needed a second Reconstruction. Well, what was the Reconstruction? That was an error of during the system of white supremacy, where Black people were receiving quite a bit of comfort. They were allowed to do more things within the system of white supremacy, and even that was too much for the racists, to where they tightened the grip of the system. So, and Hoover is saying we don't need to see Black people thriving again. Basically, we don't need to allow them to become judges. We don't need to allow them to hold any sort of weight in our decisions. There are victims, they're not our equals. That's how I am decoding that. Yep. And I have in my notes: rhetoric, code words, masterful deception. Mr. Hoover. And yeah, and again, buffers from page 7. This is just really hammering in that Mr. Hoover was a master of deception. This is from page 7. The ways in which Hoover explained FBI behavior to the public and to the men in the Justice Department and the White House seem eminently reasonable, constrained by law, the Constitution, and public opinion. The director lacked the authority to act decisively against Fannie Hamer's tormentors or other enforcers of white supremacy. If the American people and their representatives in the Congress had not decided to rid their land of Jim Crow, why should the FBI be expected to take lead in doing so? Hoover saw no great question of right and wrong in the Waiona jail, only the question of states' rights. How does the federal government go about protecting Hamer's civil rights without disrupting the federal balance? Exactly where do the rights of minorities end? Exactly where does the power of the majority begin? Defending his surveillances, Hoover said he spied on civil rights workers for their own good, keeping track of communist infiltrators and purging them when possible, and using the data gathered on demonstration plans to construct an informal system of protection. So just want to do some examining of the words used here. The rights of minorities end. So a minority in the system of white supremacy is a person who has been made to be childlike by a racist man, racist woman, and racist child. When we're talking about minority in terms of numbers, meaning what population of people is less or more, white people are actually the minority. Globally, they have always been a minority, but they have projected that onto us, it seems, and they have made us a minority in a different sense, and mentally, I would say. And they have all, and they are the majority. White people, no matter how small, they are the majority. And when it comes to what decisions happen on this planet, and that is incorrect, and actually motivation for everyone not white to want to produce balance. Because we were here asking, what is, he says here, how can he help Fannie Lou without disrupting the federal balance? What is a federal balance? Is it a bank account? Because it's definitely not balance between people in this area where Fannie Lou Hamer is being terrorized and her associates. Also, just how they've always used this communist code term. Karl Marx, who was a white person, introduced this term, and they just have been using it ever since to justify harming non-white people, or using this term to confuse non-white people. So yeah, it was never ever really about communist infiltrators. It's always been about, we have to focus and make sure Fannie Lou Hamer and people like her are not successful in their efforts of countering us. We're in the business of mistreating these people. Yeah, I have it here highlighted, but I already discussed that no one, we have Fannie Lou Hamer, she's beaten, her and associates are brutally beaten, greater confinement in jail. No one is ever reprimanded or imprisoned for mistreating them, torturing her. And this, even that they have so-called declassified these documents, information, this is evident of practicing of racism, because a lot of information is still redacted. And there's some information that will always be only for the powerful racists to know what really happened. And that's them protecting some people who may still be alive, or just, we don't want to actually tell everyone what really went down, because that would be telling them how we practice our business, and we can't have too many people knowing about how we practice our business of white supremacy. So there's examples. Okay, so yeah, this is an example. Well, them using the communism, them being the racist man, racist woman, racist child, using that term communism to justify mistreating Black people, infiltrating Black people. that is a demonstration of them, how they are able to play all sides and control all sides, because again, communism came from a white person. So here, this is from the final page, page 8 of the introduction. We have here, to understand the FBI's behavior and consequences of that behavior, it is less important to look at FBI actions in isolation or to listen to the apolitical explanations Hoover offered to the public and his ostensible superiors and the government, than to examine the totality of the FBI response to the Black struggle for freedom and justice for all. Such an examination raises questions of motivation and an agenda that go beyond Hoover's stated reasons for acting as he did, eroding the legal, constitutional, and national security expectations that purportedly underlay those reasons, and an inclusive examination suggests that personal, bureaucratic, political, and ideological choices shade FBI actions. Regardless of the positive contributions individual agents made to the Black struggle, Hoover's perceptions, values, and vision gave rise to a politics which cannot be held legitimate, either a legal or moral sense. A further examination suggests that the FBI's performance cannot be considered apart from the decisions of responsible federal officials in the White House and the Justice Department. No matter how autonomous it seems, Hoover's bureaucracy was part of a larger structure. The federal government's executive branch and Hoover's bureaucracy was part of a larger structure, the federal government's executive branch. In the final analysis, then, the story of the FBI and Black America is part of the larger history of a government that has been at odds more often than not over the past 200 years with its own non-white citizens and its professed values. So kind of here is very convoluted, and you have to decipher the code phrases, but basically it has been said that Kenneth O'Reilly has basically indicated to me that racists or white people who have decided to practice racism, they have been at war, mistreating us for at least 200 years, according to Kenneth O'Reilly. And that's more than long enough to be mistreated by someone. So we should want to solve this problem. But yeah, so that was the introduction. The next chapter is called The Negro Question, Origins of a Private War. Yeah, and I would definitely encourage folks to go to this website, and any person, like any Black person that you may know about of significant value in regards to the race war, see if there's a file on them. Or you could just, because you can check out the index, but for some reason Fannie Lou Hamer does not pop up in the index. I had to type in her name to get the files. But yeah, COINTELPRO, super important. I thought I knew enough about just sabotage that the system can conduct against non-white people, because I studied simple sabotage module, but I was wrong. Very, very important text. I would definitely urge people to read it for themselves, so they don't have to hear me stammering on, fumbling on. But hey, if you don't like reading, if you don't want to read the text and want to buy the book, then I hope this can be of constructive value. Making sure I didn't miss anything for my notes. Oh, thanks for our audience. Thanks for participating, Miss Christine Williams. What's the code? Miss Shamita Nicole and Jay Elegant. Please like, share, and comment on this if you thought it was of constructive value. We'll be here again to continue to study. We'll also be here to continue to study Bring the War Home by Catherine and Bailu. Anywho, CRWS signing out.
Alive. You are alive.
No. I exist.